Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We have one more speaker, and I hope I can encourage you all to stay because Peter's got some fantastic stuff to tell us. Peter is a consultant. For many, many years, he was a principal with a UK-based consultancy company called Land Use Consultants. More recently, he's been working for some months now, perhaps as much as a year or so, in Malawi. So,
and he's fiddling with the controls and able to cancel the last one.
Okay.
And finally, and perhaps his greatest accolade, he's a member of the SEA testing.
Thank you very much, Barry.
Okay. Where's yours?
There's this one here.
Right there?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, and straight into slideshow. Yep. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to try and spend 5 minutes on setting the context and then another 7 or 8 minutes talking about the climate issues. This is a project undertaken for the World Bank. Everything I say is strictly as the independent consultant. The bank has not endorsed the product, nor as yet have the government of Malawi. Having said that, we've had a very inclusive consultative process from the start. The title is SEA and Climate Change, but this is strictly about SEA. Malawi, rather like Mali, you could almost take those two slides and interpose them in terms of the issues and the problems that we're dealing with. We're covering the southern end of the central map there, which is the Shire Basin. It's the river, the only river that exits from Lake Malawi, third largest lake in the world. It's actually 600 kilometers north-south, best part of 100 kilometers in width. It's an absolutely massive inland sea. The Shire Basin SEA has a very wide brief to support the integration of sustainable resource use into development planning processes within the Shire Basin, literally everything that falls part of that. It was called in the TOR an ex-ante SEA. In other words, it's being done before the policies are in place. And it's not specific to any project, policy or plan. It covers everything that could affect planning processes within the Shire. So climate change was not necessarily going to be a key output from the process. Its aim to increase better understanding, better and more efficient working between stakeholders, greater awareness of sustainability, strengthened institutions, an agreed framework for sustainability, monitoring framework, and more rational use of resources. Very wide range of issues. Here listed are just some of the international donor community investment programs which form part of the subject matter for the SEA. There is an enormous amount of international interest and assistance to Malawi because it's one of the, well, it is in fact the 5th poorest nation in the world. And in 2005, it was faced with a disaster, food shortage, food insecurity, when 5 million out of the 13 million people were close to starvation. SEA process has been very similar to those we've already heard about, starting at grassroots level, starting with a review process, then building scenarios, working through community workshops to a technical workshop, and in fact that last stage of June, which is something that isn't often reported in SEAs, on hold at the present time until it is judged appropriate to take the conclusions to the highest level, which is at cabinet level. So we've gone through all of the stages. We've got the endorsement at director level of ministries, but we have all the ministries in Malawi involved in this process. As I say, it began at grassroots. This is the smallest and most impoverished of the districts, and this exercise was a prioritization exercise for them to tell us what the issues were that mattered. The slide previously was from Nzanji. It's the only one where climate change actually appears at the top of the list. It was their highest priority, but climate change figured in all of the others. This map actually is, it's not very well produced here, but it's actually a map produced entirely by printing the 7th order stream order from a GIS map. So the blue is actually the network of rivers in Malawi. The only one that's ever talked about is the Shire in light blue running through the middle. The significance of that is that most of these rivers flow for maybe 2 weeks in the year. They're otherwise perennial and they're completely dry. Malawi's population has grown from 1966 from around 3.5 to 3.7 million to its present level of over 12 million, almost 13 million. Poverty within the districts which are involved in the Shire is extremely high. It's above 50% in all. In some cases, 80% of people are on less than $1 a day. But the bar at the bottom is significant, the bar in red, because those people are what are termed ultra-poor. They fall into the quartile 40% below the average. Out of the process of the different discussions, this was the list of priorities that were identified, and I've highlighted in 3, in the darker colours, management of the Shire, anticipating climate change, and combating environmental degradation as the 3 key themes that came through from the process. And interestingly, they parallel quite closely with government goals, where again you can see 2 highlighted: social protection, reducing disaster, and managing climate change. Big question with SEA and climate change is how to present conclusions in a simple way to government, because very often our technical discussion is lost on anybody who hasn't time to listen. This model attempts to mirror what the government herself has proposed for the Shire Basin. We're simply saying very coldly, the model will not work, and why? And the answer is, when you factor in resource degradation, in which climate change plays a big part, you end up with uncertain growth and not positive growth. The preferred model actually requires us to build sustainable environment into the picture and to get a continuous virtuous loop. Key part of the SEA has been building scenarios. This scenario is modelling the economy from present day to 2025. And the blips that you can see on here are simulated, but they are modelled on existing data, and they show what happens when you either have a significant flood or a significant drought. We've also modelled an example with an earthquake because the area is earthquake prone. And here we have 5 scenarios which are discussed in the report, showing the very different economic outcomes which could follow if government and the international donor community either choose to follow or reject the conclusions that the SEA has come to. They range from the existing situation in scenario A to a very positive outcome of everyone working together in scenario B. But actually, if you look at scenarios C and D, you see some fairly apocalyptical events occurring, and I'll explain why. So, the critical issues identified in the SEA. Rapid population growth. It causes a major issue in terms of where we're going. Environmental dynamics. It's a point that Jess brought up at the beginning. We too often look at the environment as if it's static. In reality, Malawi is faced, without climate change, with very significant variability in its climatic pattern year on year. But add to that climate change and you have a real conundrum. The movement from rural areas to urban areas, highly significant. And then a group of 4 factors which the SEA majors on, but I've not treated in this presentation, because they're all the reasons why things go wrong with planning. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about government intervention, NGO intervention, or frankly the international donor community intervention. They all suffer from the same activities. Uncoordinated development, projects that chase each other's tails, inappropriate institutions to put the effects or proposals into effect, poor governance, and poor planning and decision making. Population growth appears at the top of this list because in the 15-year horizon we're looking at, there could well be another 1.2 million people to be fed in this one part of Malawi. And when we look at the calculation of what it needs in terms of food production, and I'm using 6 tons per hectare, which is the European level, not the African level, which should be nearer 2 tons per hectare. Look at the area we need of irrigated land, 36,000 hectares. We have 60,000 hectares potentially available in the Shire. So at African rates, we'd need all of that simply to feed the increase in population. But that's an issue in itself to put the thing in perspective. What really matters here is the climate change issues.